Hello everyone, let's see some brilliant Capablanca's win in that video. Very typical game on topic how to use opponent bad piece. Game was played in Hastings 1919. Capablanca was black against William Winter, and let's see what happened in that game. Well, game of 4 knights played, and bishop b5, bishop b4, castling, and today d3, bishop c3 is more common, but bishop c6 is more patient continuation, and that was idea of Aaron Nimzowitsch. What's the point? White intends after d3 to prepare for advance f4, as well as the opening of f5 and domination of the outpost on f5 and attack on opponent king. D takes c6 happened, d3, bishop d6 and bishop g5. h3 was better with idea knight e2, g4 and knight g3 and knight f5. What's the point? In game happened bishop g5. This move does not fit in with above mentioned plan by Nimzowitsch. Correct way to continue is h3, g4 and then knight e2, knight g3, knight f5. Occasionally white monarch usually goes to g2 with rook h1 or to h1 with rook g1 idea. Well, after that preparation, white must carry out the thrust f4 and then attack the opponent king. Very often game takes on positional character after exchange of several pieces, and you will see soon why bishop g5 was wrong choice. h6, bishop h4 and c5, not only preventing white d4 in some variations but also setting some trap. What's the point? Knight d2 is better with idea knight c4, knight e3, and then trying to occupy d5 or f5. But knight d5 happened immediately, and that's serious, maybe even decisive mistake. What's the point? Before knight d5, for instance, in that position, black cannot play g5 because knight takes g5, h takes bishop g5 with dangerous pin and some possibilities for white to actively play on king's side. But after c5, knight d5, g5 is perfect move. What's the point? Now knight g5 isn't working because knight d5 will cost white a piece. So after g5, knight f6 only move, queen takes, bishop g3 and bishop g4. Very simple, but same time very brilliant move by Capablanca. What can black do? Knight f3 is pinned. Sooner or later white must play h3, and now of course not bishop h5, not bishop e6, but simply taking and taking. Now you can see red marker on g3 because bishop on g3 is very bad, and green marker on d6 because bishop on d6 will be very good. Surprisingly, mostly white pawns are on light squares and mostly black pawns are on dark squares, but still black bishop on d6 is much better than white bishop on g3. This is very instructive classic position. White is practically playing a piece down. g3 bishop is shut and can only be freed by a pawn sacrifice. For instance, white can play king g2, bishop h2, f4, and then after e takes f4, white can play f3 with bishop g1, but that costs both time and material. What should be black's correct plan to realize his big positional advantage? Well, it's simple. If opponent has a weak piece, a bad piece on one flank, you should just switch fighting front to another side of the board. Well, black correct plan is attack on queen side, where with his advantage in space and after breakthrough to open up the queen side, black will have an extra piece, bishop d6. First of all, f6, free bishop d6 by defending e5 pawn, king g2 and a5. There are many possibilities for black to open position on queen side with dangerous initiative there, having an extra piece. Maybe b5 was also a reasonable option, but okay. a5 was done with idea a4, and of course white plays a4. It's interesting once again to note that black has a bad bishop because 7 black pawns are on dark squares, and he has also black square bishop. But despite, the only possible way for white to save the game would be if f2 pawn was not there. First king f7, rook h1 and king e6. Very patient and very simple and very amazing play by Capablanca. Well, one of very well known and very useful principles for successful playing endgames is first activate all pieces, even king, and only then organize some pawn activities on flank, or let's say in center. So after fully mobilizing his pieces, king f7, king e6, black is ready to organize some attack on queen side. How it will be organized? Well, rook h b8 and b5. If white stops that with c4, then black can play rook a6, rook b6, rook b4, and then c6 with b5, for instance. Let's see what happened. h4, and black simply ignores the king side because white can achieve nothing there. Rook fb8. Black can take, but not more. And now, very interesting. If rook h7, rook can attack nothing. Even if white doubles rooks on 7th rank after rook h7, rook g7, rook h1 and rook h7, still everything is protected, and black will just play on queen side after b5. If rook h6, no problem, rook f6 is very well protected, so white can do nothing on h5. b3 and c6. Very good move. Black wants to take with c takes b if white takes on b5. No unnecessary haste. Black calmly prepares b5 thrust. If b5 immediately, game will be balanced because white stopped black activities on queen side, and black cannot play c4. So c6, perfect. White doubled rooks with rook a2, b5, rook ha1. And now white is ready to stop black activities on a file, but white of course is unable to prevent another decisive thrust. Well, black is not interested in taking b takes a because rook takes a4 with no progress for black. Of course b4 will be even worse because position will be blocked there, but c4 is decisive thrust. What's the point? Opening position, opening b file, where soon black rook will dominate. Black has two options. Let's see what happens if d takes c4. Of course b takes c4, and if that, simply that move rook b4. With idea rook takes c4, rook a b8 with completely winning position. White decided to take a takes b, and of course c takes b intermediate move. What happens if rook a5? Well, very interesting and funny. Rook takes, and b2 promoting. Well, after c takes b, white must take c takes b, and now rook takes b5. Well, the bishop g3 and king g2 are mere spectators who can only watch the black pieces conquering the queen side. As above mentioned, black simply organized some activities on queen side on opposite flank to white paralyzed bishop g3. Rook a4, what to do else? Rook b3, d4. That was last black-white chance trying to open bishop g3, but simply black keeps pawn on e5 and defends pawn b4. Next black move can be, for instance, bishop b4 with idea to organize c5 and step by step advancing a pawn, with transferring king even to b5 if necessary. Rook c4, and now it's time rook b4, exchanging rook or taking d4. Black decided not to take rook because that will be completely lost for him after bishop takes b4 and advancing a pawn. He decided to take on c6 and rook d4. A wonderful game on the theme how to isolate piece. Bishop g3, of course. So here in that example you can see how to play if opponent has very passive piece on some part of the board, and of course how to avoid arising of some bad piece, desperately bad piece in your camp. Well, everything started with bishop g4, of course even with earlier white's mistake knight d5, which allowed to black forcingly to double pawns on f-file, and of course with presence of white so paralyzed bishop on g3, black has perfect plan to realize his huge positional advantage. Practically black is a piece up, and by playing on queen side he will have an extra piece there. But still very instructive game. Capablanca first played f6, king f7, king e6 before any decisive pawn activities. Once again I want to underline that very instructive principle. Do not take any pawn activities even in endgame before fully optimizing your all pieces, including the king. So after including king activation, setting king on e6 and safe place on light square, black after rook fb8 prepared everything in his camp, and finally after c6 decisive thrust b5 followed. White simply couldn't resist, and black having extra piece on queen time fully dominated there, with easily converted that huge positional advantage into full point. Hope you enjoyed that lesson, and see you soon with new examples. Bye bye.